Is climate legislation derailed again? What the Senate co-authors are doing today to get talks back on track. Massey Energy says everything was normal at the Upper Big Branch mine just minutes before a fatal blast. And robots are trying to shut off oil leaking from the rig that sank last week in the Gulf. And we're learning BP was cited in 2007 for inadequate employee training.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good afternoon, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report. Well, by now we were supposed to have Senate climate legislation in our hands, but after a last-minute protest from co-author Lindsey Graham, the KGL bill is again delayed. The three authors, Graham, John Kerry, and Joe Lieberman, had planned to unveil their legislation this afternoon. But on Saturday, Graham pulled his support, upset that Majority Leader Harry Reid may address the issue of immigration before climate. In a letter explaining his decision, Graham writes, all of the key players, particularly the Senate leadership, have to want this debate as much as we do. I deeply regret that election year politics will impede, if not derail, our efforts to make our nation energy independent. In response, Harry Reid issued a statement saying, as I have said, I am committed to trying to enact comprehensive clean energy legislation this session of Congress. Doing so will require strong bipartisan support, and energy could be next if it's ready. And there may be some progress underway right now on delivering the climate bill. Joe Lieberman's office says the three co-authors are meeting today. Lieberman spokesman calls the KGL bill very much alive. Massey Energy says explosive gas levels were not high just minutes before the explosion that killed 29 coal miners at the Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia. Investigators have detected high levels of two potentially explosive gases inside the mine since the explosion. But in a news conference today, Massey Board Director Stanley Sobolewski said air samples taken during the shift change before the blast showed, in his words, everything was okay, including explosive gas levels and airflow. Another board director, Bobby Inman, calls allegations that the company put profits over safety a, quote, big lie. He says those sentiments are coming from lawyers for shareholders that are suing the company over the accident. Investigators still have not determined the exact cause. Massey President and CEO Don Blankenship says the accident has left his company humbled and hurt and searching for answers. President Obama says 29 coal miners killed in an explosion this month lived and they died pursuing the American dream. The president delivered a eulogy for the fallen miners on Sunday in West Virginia, then spent time with families of those killed at the Upper Big Branch mine, site of the deadliest mine accident in 40 years. The president told families the nation would honor their memories by improving mine safety.
We cannot bring back the 29 men we lost. They are with the Lord now. Our task here on earth is to save lives from being lost in another such tragedy. To do what we must do individually and collectively to assure safe conditions underground, to treat our miners like they treat each other, like a family, because we are all family and we are all Americans. And we have to lean on one another and look out for one another and love one another.
At least one member of the rescue team that searched in vain for survivors says the president's words were comforting. Obama has ordered a federal review of coal mines with poor safety records and urged federal officials to strengthen safety laws. The explosion will also be the subject of a Senate hearing tomorrow, with the nation's top mine safety official expected to testify. Submersible robots are being used to mop up oil leaking from the oil rig that sank last week off Louisiana's Gulf Coast. Saturday, a leak was discovered 5,000 feet down on the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig. Experts believe as much as 1,000 barrels of oil a day are leaking. If these subsea robots can't shut off the well, BP may drill a relief well to inject materials to stop the oil flow, but that would take 2 to 3 months.
We have an ROV 24/7 monitoring to make sure nothing's escaping. So right now we're focusing on securing the well, but absolutely we are monitoring 24/7 to make sure there's no additional leak beyond the 1,000 barrels per day.
Scientists at NOAA say an oily sheen covering 600 square miles is slowly making its way north and should hit Gulf beaches in 3 to 4 days. BP officials say they are working feverishly to contain the slick and minimize ecological damage. We are learning that BP Exploration and Production was fined in 2007 for inadequately training employees in well control, same conditions that may have led to the suspected blowout and fire last week on that rig. This is according to the U.S. Minerals Management Service. In November of 2002, a BP-owned rig called the Ocean King had to evacuate all 65 of its workers for nearly 2 days after operators found a dangerous rise in gas pressure and explosive levels. In its report after the incident, MMS cited BP and its subcontractor for what it called a lack of knowledge of the system and lack of pre-event planning and procedures. MMS slapped BP with $41,000 in fines. BP was also fined $75,000 in 2003 by MMS for not having adequate water pressure on one rig's fire protection system in the Gulf of Mexico, as well as another $80,000 for bypassing safety alarms that could have indicated dangerously high pressure, similar to what caused the near blowout in 2002. New York has placed new restrictions on shale gas drilling in the Syracuse and New York City watersheds. These new regulations require drilling companies get an individual environmental impact statement that entails a long, costly, and complicated process. DEC Commissioner Pete McGinnis said this essentially removes the watersheds from drilling development. Officials in both regions had called on state regulators to ban drilling there, pointing to fears of polluting drinking water supplies for more than 9 million people from the process of hydraulic fracturing. However, the executive director of the Independent Oil and Gas Association of New York says the regulations will do irreversible fiscal harm to communities that would benefit from tax revenue from drilling. McGinnis says 80% of the land is privately owned. The two watersheds are the only areas of the state with special federal permits to use unfiltered surface water for drinking. 4 developing nations say the world must work for a strong climate change agreement this year. Wrapping up strategy talks in South Africa on Sunday, environment ministers from South Africa, Brazil, China, and India all say they want year-end talks in Mexico to produce a binding international agreement to reduce greenhouse gases and to help poor countries cope with climate change. They also added success could still come from a 2011 round in South Africa. Hopes for success in Mexico have been limited since the talks in Copenhagen last year failed to produce a binding world agreement. Here are some goings-on now around the Beltway tomorrow in energy. 8 a.m. starts the National Hydropower Association annual conference at the Capitol Hilton. 10 a.m. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee has nominations for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That's in Dirksen. 2 p.m. the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee has a hearing. This one's on mine safety and the recent explosion at the Upper Big Branch Mine in West Virginia. Assistant Secretary of Labor for Mine Safety and Health, Joe Main, and United Mine Workers President Cecil Roberts will testify. That is also in Dirksen. That's the Energy Report. We'll see you again tomorrow with your latest energy news. For any suggestions or comments about our programming here on Clean Skies News, we'd like to hear from you. You can email us at contact@cleanskies.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook too. From all of us here in the Energy News Center, good night.